propose a UN safe zone in Kabul. USA's Dan Naraki has more.
France and the United Kingdom will propose the creation of a safe zone under UN control in Kabul to protect those trying to flee the country. French President Emmanuel Macron told a French newspaper on Saturday that the countries would make that proposal at an emergency UN meeting on Monday, where the ambassadors from the U.S., Russia, China, France, and Britain will meet to discuss the humanitarian and security situation in Afghanistan. From the USA Radio News Ohio Bureau, I'm Dan Naraki.
For USA Radio News, I'm Brad Bernards.
Chronicles of Hope is essential reading for seekers of inspiration and spiritual empowerment. This series offers nourishment for those on a path of increased awareness at this challenging time. Inspired by higher sources of wisdom, Chronicles of Hope delivers messages to lift your spirit with a roadmap of hope and guidelines for living a life of expanded consciousness. The guides offer powerful insight for mental, emotional, and spiritual growth at this critical tipping point for humanity. The message is clear. We must change. We have the power to raise our vibrational energy individually and collectively before it's too late. I am Lois Herman, author of the best-selling Chronicles of Hope series and host of the Inspiring Hope radio show at WSMN.live or 95.3 FM. You can find me at loisherman.com or chroniclesofhope.net.
The views and opinions of the following show do not reflect those of WSMN, its owners, and/or associates.
Welcome to Inspiring Hope with Lois Herman, a leading expert in professional coaching, clinical hypnosis, and energy clearing. Lois is an award-winning author of Chronicles of Hope. She has decades of experience in advanced hypnosis techniques, has conducted highly effective success coaching programs that have helped clients discover ways to achieve success, empower themselves, their families, as well as holistic practitioners to expand their practices. Get ready to be empowered with your host, Lois Herman.
Good morning and welcome to Inspiring Hope. I am your host, Lois Herman, and I'm here to inspire you with positive messages as we celebrate people who are making a difference in our world. When we focus our thoughts and energies on truth, honesty, and integrity, we create powerful shifts that cause us to be more positive and peaceful. As we lift our energy, we empower everyone around us. If we each do what we can to make small shifts in awareness, we create ripples of hope. Join us as catalysts for positive change for our families, our communities, and our world at large. I hope you're inspired by today's show. And today I want to talk about something that happened to me a few weeks ago. I had the privilege of sharing a presentation with the ladies of the DAR, Daughters of American Revolution. As the guest speaker for the annual Regents Banquet for the DAR, I was delighted to be invited to participate in such a prestigious organization of patriotic women. They asked me to speak on a historical mystery that I wrote 6 years ago, Spirits of Amoskeag, the Wounded Heroes of the Manchester Mills. This is a story that I promised to tell of the child slavery, abuse, and tragedy that happened in the mills of New Hampshire and was likely repeated in other places around the world. I'll share their story of the great unspeakable from the late 1800s with you another time. This was a time when people were censored from telling what they knew to be true. How similar is that with what's going on now? Preparing for the DAR presentation took me on quite a personal, introspective journey, connecting with my own passion for America's history. Born and raised on Army bases, I hold great respect for the sacrifices our military and their families make throughout their lives. I've lived in and restored antique properties, some 1890s Victorians in Tennessee, a 1770s colonial in Dunbarton, and even created a modern replica using antique architectural pieces in Windham. In the process, I also discovered that several of my own great-great-grandfathers fought in the Revolutionary War. No wonder New England has always felt like home to me. It's in my roots. We can only imagine the hardships that our forefathers and mothers went through for freedom's sake. In a few moments, we'll have the honor of discussing our patriotic history with the New Hampshire State Regent of the DAR, Trish Jackson. I was really inspired by this amazing group of dedicated DAR women who uphold a legacy of patriotism, historic education, and preservation. They remind us of the importance of the Constitution, upholding the rights our ancestors fought, sacrificed, and died for. As I stood solemnly with this gathering of formally dressed, beautiful, and respectful women, I could feel their passionate commitment to America and each other. I realized that it had been a while since I'd recited the Pledge of Allegiance and our national anthem with such enthusiasm, and I was deeply moved by a poem they read together called The American's Creed by William Tyler Page. Here it is. I believe in the United States of America as a government of the people, by the people, for the people, whose just powers are derived from the consent of the governed, a democracy in a republic, a sovereign nation of many sovereign states, a perfect union, one and inseparable, established upon those principles of freedom, equality, justice, and humanity for which American patriots sacrificed their lives and fortunes. I therefore believe it is my duty to my country to love it, to support its Constitution, to obey its laws, to respect its flag, and to defend it against all enemies. This was written in 1917 and accepted by the United States House of Representatives in April of 1918. So these patriotic women of the DAR are dedicated to upholding the history of our country with a passion for historical education and patriotism. One local chapter of the DAR is the Molly Stark chapter in Manchester. Molly, or Elizabeth Stark, was the mother of 11 children and a war heroine herself, opening her home as a hospital and assisting the war efforts as a battlefield nurse. Molly's husband, General John Stark, is the decorated Revolutionary War hero who is the originator of our New Hampshire state motto, live free or die. Actually, his complete statement was, we must live free or die, for death is not the greatest of evils. Think about that. Think about the determination the early colonists had as they fought in the American Revolution for freedom from oppression, taxes, dominance, and control. The Industrial Revolution I wrote about in the Spirits book heralded a different type of oppression based on long hours of slave labor for the working class, creating products for the elite. Are we now facing the need for another revolution from oppressive cyber social censorship and control? Haven't we been around this bend a few times before? When will we respect the experiences of our past and take lessons from those who showed us the way? In Chronicles of Hope, Book 3, the Archangel Azrael tells us to look to what the early Americans achieved via revolution. We need to do the same now. Evolution would be much simpler if we could only wait until those who choose to control have passed over. If there are so many in the evil swamp of destruction and desecration that the concept of allowing the process of evolution to occur is no longer an option. We must rise up against the negative forces to embrace our power in the light of truth. We must join together as warriors of light to encourage a spiritual and political revolution for freedom. People are fed up with the system. Now is the time to remove those who've been in power for far too long. It won't help to find other people to put in their place. People themselves must step up and make themselves available. Azrael said, "Go back and look to your ancient American history. No one said, there needs to be change. You go make change." The individuals themselves stepped up and did what they knew would be difficult and painful to do. They put themselves in a position where the public could scrutinize their every move, but they did it. Those are the kind of people we need to motivate and support now. We need to put real people into positions where they can affect change. If you make yourselves examples of stepping forward, examples of, we know this is painful, but we're going to do it because we believe it's right, others will follow that example. As we look to our ancestors and stand up for what we believe is right, we will hold true to our belief in truth, honesty, and integrity. Let us fight for a return to America's original mission of the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You are listening to Inspiring Hope with Lois Herman at WSMN 1590 or 95.3 FM. Please help us share these messages. Watch the videos on my YouTube channel or website, loisherman.com, and join our Hope community for support and inspiration at chroniclesofhope.net. Here is a wonderful rendition of America's national anthem with a story that inspired it. Wow. I don't know about you, but that was so emotional. How many times I've sang that song and listened to the words, but didn't realize what the words meant. Oh my gosh. So I just happened on that, and I thank you, Trish, for helping me to reevaluate what's important. So I am delighted to have Trish Jackson in the studio with me. Trish is our New Hampshire State Regent, or President of the Daughters of the American Revolution, and she also represents the local Molly Stark chapter. And I'm excited to have Trish here to share her passion for patriotic women and people throughout American history. The DAR helps keep American values alive through education, historic preservation, and patriotism, right? So good morning, Trish. So glad you're here with us today. So welcome.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
So I know there are certain things that you're free to talk about and others that you have to be careful because the DAR is an apolitical organization, right? And
Yes.
yet you hold to the historic history,
Yes.
keeping history alive. So tell us a little bit about you and what caused you to get involved with the DAR.
Well, I got involved, as you know, the DAR was founded in 1890.
Okay.
And it is a nonprofit, non-political volunteer women's service organization dedicated to promoting patriotism and preserving American history. And so those are two things I hold very dear to myself.
Absolutely.
Those are near and dear to my heart.
Yes.
So I wanted to be a part once I didn't know what the DAR was 25 years ago. And
Yeah.
sadly, I wish I'd known sooner.
Right.
But I've always been... I support the troops. I've always been involved in my local community, and this was just a natural fit. I found a group of like-minded women, forward-thinking women,
Yes.
who had similar values to what I did. So that's, I researched, found out I had a patriot.
Yeah.
And my patriot is Daniel Thurston. He's out of New York. He was part of the Albany militia. So, the militia has, in New Hampshire in particular, General John Stark, when he led the militia, that it was a natural fit for me at the time. And I had met some very nice ladies out of the Molly Stark chapter. And I had learned more, researched more what the DAR was about and the things that they were involved with in the local community of Manchester, as well as New Hampshire and around the nation. And so I was very excited to join and be a part of all of that.
Wow. And it is interesting to revivify. I think you can squeeze that together a little bit so it won't slide. There you go. To re-engage with history. I know for myself, like I said, I've long been curious about restoring old houses and the history behind the houses and history of what all has happened. But I've recently, especially since these messages came through from spiritual guides, who would think, I've been really more focused on learning more about our American history. And I also had the distinct privilege or serendipitous honor of living just a mile or so from the Molly Stark house in Dunbarton. And I had done a bit of research when I was working on my 1770s colonial, so I came up with a lot of little interesting trivia about the people and the history. And I mean, it was hardship. It was not an easy life for these people. Colonists aside, then the battle and the wars, and it's just amazing what people went through, and just to fight for our freedom, for the right to, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is the foundation. And it's as if we've gotten a little complacent in this day and age, have we not?
Well, that's, I think, part of what the DAR does. We're involved in the community.
Yes.
We're a positive force in many different areas. The Service to America Committee, which is the national committee, but all of the states around the nation and the world actually participate. And it gives you an option, the ability to make a difference in your community.
And so what kind of things do you do? I know that some of the different chapters do a lot of work helping veterans and veterans' families. So what kind of things does the DAR do?
Well, most recently in the pandemic, all around the nation, over 1 million masks were made and distributed to, within the communities wherever they were needed. So when you think that's a lot of sewing to do.
It sure is.
But it really goes to the history of the DAR. Wherever there's a need,
Yes.
the DAR jumps in, and they're the first ones to roll up their sleeves, and along with many other groups in the community, and find a way, to help their fellow mankind. And during the pandemic, the masks were essential, and there was such a short supply.
Sure.
So that was one thing they did. We've supported all the first responders. These first responders with the pandemic took on a whole different meaning.
Oh, boy, did they ever.
So we were out there trying to support the hospital's donations, anything that they needed.
Yes. Yeah.
And that happened in New Hampshire. We had a big postal initiative within New Hampshire, which was something unique.
What is that?
State. Well, they're also first responders. They kept the mail going.
Oh, yes.
So
right.
if you looked at the post offices, we had daughters all around the state that had brought in big banners saying, the DAR supports our first responders.
Okay.
Because they, as we said, you kept the mail going, and they were also out on the front line. They were delivering those packages and going to houses.
Sure.
So we wanted to thank them. We were thanking, obviously, the nurses and the doctors and any type of health care. The teachers,
Yes.
Not just teachers, but aides, advisors, anyone that's involved, that was keeping our children being educated, because it was a different landscape that had to be navigated.
Yes.
I think one, obviously, we'd never seen in history. So in true DAR fashion, we jumped in and found our niche and our way to help and be a
Wow.
positive force.
Yeah. So how would people join? When you asked me to present, my husband is really into genealogy, and I know he's a Mayflower kind of guy, and he also is a son of the American Revolution. So he said, well, you probably have an ancestor that that could qualify you for the to be a participant in the DAR. So I reached out to my brother, who was also really into genealogy, and he said, oh yeah, we've got 5 fifth great grandfathers plus more. So now that I have found that I have ancestors that fought in the American Revolution, now I have to submit an application. So can you walk us through the process? How would
Sure.
someone join?
Well, there are chapters. We have 21 chapters around the state.
Yeah.
And usually we have websites that give you the link to the different registrars. So for instance, you live in the Manchester area. So if you were going to join the Molly Stark chapter, for instance, you would get in touch with the chapter, usually via email. We have things in the newspaper and also websites that would direct you for how you do it. But you work with a registrar that will work closely with you, and they will help you gather your documents, because anyone who can prove lineal descent is more than welcome to join. We just have to get all the documents, which are things like birth certificates, census records, and so forth, that will take you back. Most people are probably back 6, 7 generations, sometimes 8, depending on your age.
Wow.
As we are open to women 18 to however old you may be, 105.
Yeah. Well, that's the daughters, and then you have the children of, right?
Yep, there are 3 distinct organizations. There
Okay.
are the Children of the American Revolution, the Sons, and the Daughters.
Okay.
And they each have their own national organizations. But obviously our goals and our tenets are very, very similar.
Right. So I know there are a lot of people who would like to have their children involved in, some sort of an organization that has great integrity. So it would be a wonderful opportunity. Your daughter, was she a child, and then
Yes.
she's now a daughter
Yes,
of? Yeah.
both of my children. I have a boy and a girl who are in their 20s now. But yes, they both joined at birth,
Okay.
or very shortly thereafter, I should
Yeah.
say. But it's CAR, Children of the American Revolution, is a wonderful organization for children, because it provides such an opportunity for public speaking. Not only you learned your history,
Yeah.
but there are things that they're far-reaching beyond CAR that will help you later on in job interviews. You'd be surprised at how 5-year-olds can run a parliamentary procedure meeting, because they have learned, this early on, the different the format and the formalities of a business meeting, and they're not afraid to get up and speak.
You got to teach them young. I know, as a
They
hypnotist,
do.
I do a lot of work with people who have a fear of public speaking, and so if children if we teach them young,
Well, they are our future, for sure.
They are our future. Oh my goodness! So this also gets them out of all about me, and helps them to contribute into the community. Correct?
Yes. It's a very positive organization. It's a positive force. There's educational values, patriotism, obviously, historic preservation. They know their history. Some of them may not be able to read and write, but let me tell you, they knew who General John Stark is.
That's fascinating. Yeah. And I know that you're very involved with the Molly Stark chapter, and you were telling me even about the house that you had you inherited, or as the regent, you're responsible for organizing a lot in the state, right?
Yes, as state regent. The Stark House on 2000 Elm Street in Manchester. That's actually the boyhood home of General John Stark's father, Archibald.
Okay.
So he lived there briefly, but that is the home that the Molly Stark chapter, those ladies are the caretaker of.
I see.
So they keep it. They, in the late 60s, when the city was going to tear it down because of the modern urbanization with the bridges that were going in, they were able to work together with the community, and they moved it uptown to its current location.
So they actually bought the house for,
Yes.
did you say $1?
Yes, I think that's the lore
That's
of it.
the lore. Okay. And then they actually had to move the house and chimney and everything and put it on a new foundation.
Yes.
That's a lot of work.
Oh, it was a tremendous effort. My heart goes out to that regent, because that would have been an all-consuming job, working with the different planning committees,
Yeah.
the construction companies, because they broke the house into 3 pieces.
Right.
And put it on these long flatbeds and moved it uptown. But when you think these houses weigh millions of pounds,
Of
the
course.
pieces.
Yeah.
And I think I told you about the funny story. We laugh about the Coke bottle. If you remember
Yeah.
the little green Coke bottles in the
Yeah.
1960s, they would put that on the beam, and that's how they knew if the house was going to tip off or fall, or was in danger of falling off. So that was someone's job. They had to watch this little Coke bottle and make sure it stayed steady.
Yeah.
And obviously it did, because the house made it up there.
The simple techniques.
But when you see even the pictures, the old pictures, the power lines that were across were much lower then than they are now. So
Sure.
they had people, that was their designated job, was to hold the power lines up
As they moved.
as the house went through.
Yeah. What was the distance that it traveled?
Really only about a half a mile.
Okay,
but
but
it probably
still.
seemed like 100 miles to the
Sure.
people involved.
Yeah. Wow. So I love that. I've long had, as I was saying in my monologue, I've long had a history of preserving our ancient structures. I've done a lot of travel around the world, and I love looking at all the beautiful architecture that was. And even now, this post and beam 1770s colonial that I restored, the floors would sag, but the walls, because it was post and beam, which meant that the house was built with the structural beams, and so the walls would be connected, but the floor was pretty much free floating. And so it's interesting to learn of the different architectural history and how they built things and why, and the notched and the peg and the post and stuff. It just was, I've always been fascinated by, even the Victorian house that I worked on with all the beautiful filigree and the turns and spindles and balconies. But it's such a different type of architecture than the old colonial.
Right, and this had the giant center chimney, which
Yes.
was huge compared to, the chimneys you see today.
Sure, because they cooked in it. That was their heat. It was everything. They
Right.
gathered around the
right,
chimney.
it covered the whole landscape upstairs and downstairs.
Yeah.
And each, so that was quite a feat to move that. So it definitely was a testament to the fortitude of
Yeah.
those ladies, the 1960s.
And you said that when they
ladies.
moved the chimney, so the chimney is freestanding. The house is built around it, right?
Yes.
And so you ended up with a situation with that, even, didn't you?
Yes. Well, there were other chimneys attached, and we did have a problem at one point where one was falling off and had to be fixed. So
Yeah.
there's always some interesting architectural things,
Yeah.
especially when you move a house, because it's not the original foundation.
Sure.
So things get a little bit destabilized, and
Yeah.
over the years have to be restabilized.
Yeah. So keep preserving the old history of our architecture, it's not just our country. It's interesting. I've been watching TV series called Churn, which has to do with the American Revolution, and it's fascinating. But one of the things that I didn't realize until I watched it was the Hessians, the German troops, fought in the Philadelphia area. And I've lived through and been through that area quite a bit, and I've often thought, wow, this looks like Germany. It looks like the housing structures of Germany. So when you start investigating our history, you learn about the people who colonized and settled the different parts of the country and how they brought their architectural flavors, their knowledge of how to build and how their preferences to the regions. So I'm sure that's part of the fascination with the historic preservation.
Well, yes, I mean, it was all incorporated. It was a melting pot, if nothing else, that different cultures and different ideas that all melded together to form the fabric of our country.
Absolutely. That's what we are, a melting pot. We're a mixed, diverse group of people, and that it's based on, honesty and integrity, honoring each other. It's key, yeah. So you do a lot of education as well. You said you go into schools.
Yes, we have essay contests that with different topics each year for 5th to 8th grade. That changes out, and we have a new essay topic for the high schoolers that is going to focus because the 250th anniversary is coming up soon.
The 250th anniversary of
our nation.
Of our nation, that's right.
And so it's focusing on patriots.
Okay.
And so the hope is that the students will learn more about any patriot. They can write about anyone that has sparked their interest.
And there are a lot of women patriots too, right?
There sure are. So we hope to see some essays on that. That would be great.
Yeah.
To see some of them write about the different, as you said, Molly Stark, she was definitely a heroine of the Revolution. And there were many, many other women as well.
What was the other quote that he, John Stark called her Molly, but that was his nickname for her.
Yes.
But he had a couple of different statements that he would refer to her.
Yes, he has one other famous one where he says Molly sleeps a widow tonight. So basically saying if we don't win tonight, we're going to fight to the death. Otherwise Molly will
sleep a widow. Yeah.
But actually, he was the only one who called her Molly. If you or I were to meet her today, we would call her Elizabeth. In fact, our reenactors remind us when we wish we have a happy birthday celebration as a chapter. And the lovely woman who plays her, I called her Molly, and she kind of tapped me and said, "Oh no, dear, it's Elizabeth." And she was absolutely right because I'm not the general.
So you have reenactments.
Yes, we have reenactors that come in and they portray, and they're in total character. So the general will portray it, and it was funny. Someone said, "We love your house, General," and he said, "Well, I'm glad you like my father's home," because he was reminding them that this was his boyhood home, not his official home with Molly.
And the Molly Stark home in Dunbarton was actually Molly's childhood home. Is that correct?
Yes, that's more the Page house.
The Page house, yes. Yeah.
Because she was a page.
Mm-hmm. And that's actually Page's Corner, right?
Yes,
there.
the Four Corners.
The Four Corners, yeah.
And actually, one of the members, her name is Lorraine Allen, she owns that house right now.
Oh.
She's a member of Molly Stark.
It's a beautiful home.
Oh, it is. They've incredible historical accuracy that they took great pains to replicate it, and it's beautiful.
One of the interesting things that I learned living in the old 1770s and restoring this old house is that there are, the way that the old houses in New England, they're called New Englanders, is they usually had a center chimney or twin chimneys because that's where their heat was for, or that was their heat source and cooking source, etc. But then there was an L off the back that led to a barn. And that's because the snow gets a little deep around here. And in that L is where they would keep their chickens and their wood pile and the outhouse and all the things that they would need to survive and to get through to get to the barn, because the barn is where the farm animals were, but not in that L was maybe a carriage. That might be the carriage house, but it's really interesting that there's a reason behind all of that.
Yes, and we have actually in the Stark House on Elm Street that our L is now our meeting room. That's the place that the chapter meets, and other groups sometimes rent the house out, and we'll also use that room. But we laughed at, the chickens and the horses.
Yeah, that was there. And I also had heard that many of these homes were out in the country, and that was what was called the summer kitchen. Have you heard this?
Yes.
Yeah. So the field hands would come into that part of the house in the summer, that because it was
cool.
It was cooler. They wouldn't be heating the whole house. The winter, the kitchen was used because it would heat the house, but in the summer you wouldn't want to heat the house. So they would have the summer kitchen, but that was also where they would do their canning, and the big wood stove would maybe bathe people. And but it was it was in that wing. It was separate from the main house. I just love the history of how people used the houses and how it's evolved over the years.
Well, I suppose we still repurpose it. We do have a modern outhouse that is a part of the L.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, but it is still a very long, long room.
Yes,
where
exactly.
we have it now. There's a statue from the World's Fair, not a statue, a painting.
Ah,
they used to hang in the mayor's office of the general, and so he looks down, on us, always smiling.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, he was very well known for many different things. What can you tell us a little bit more about General John Stark, who is this is the motto for New Hampshire?
Yes, he's the hero of Bennington. Arguably, perhaps the war could have gone a different way had we not won that battle with the forces that he commanded.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also a famous statue in Wilmington, Vermont, of Molly that kind of shows testament. I like it because of the woman. She's got a baby or a child, a toddler on one hip, and then on the other hand she has a musket. So to me that's the multitasking of the women of the time period.
And you could only imagine that the men were off to war. So the women had to, now they're having to tend their own fields, tend the kids, and fight off insurgents from their own home.
Yes, they literally kept the home fires stoked and things moving along because the war went on for many, many years.
It was 7 years, right?
Yeah.
7 or 8 years, yeah, crazy.
And so it's incredible what these women were doing. I mean, the men as well, obviously, but
Sure.
They're behind every man. There's a great woman.
That's exactly right. And are there books that you share with people? I mean, is that part of the history? Is that you have lists of books that people can learn more about our American history?
We do. At the Stark House, yes, we have a library, and it has every John Stark or Molly Stark, anything that's ever been written about them that people can come in and they can make copies or they can read up there if they'd like. But we do for our new members when they join, we always have a book on the Starks that we give them as a part of a welcome gift to the group.
Yeah, I know for those of you in New England, even in New Boston, there's Molly Stark Tavern. So Molly Stark is fairly well known in this part of the country.
She's a famous lady, yes.
Yeah, little would she know. I could only imagine mother of 11, and everything else that she did. So.
Well, we also celebrate the anniversaries. The Battle of Bennington, most recently, that was a week and a half ago.
Yeah.
So it's Stark Park in Manchester. So for this particular chapter, all the chapters have different Patriot ancestors they're associated with.
I see.
And they will celebrate the different historic events associated with those. But for the Stark ladies, that's something we just most recently placed a wreath down at the Stark Graves site in honor of his contributions to the war.
So you also talked about that there is an event coming up that has to do with the ringing the bells.
Oh yes, Constitution Week.
What is that about?
Well, everyone around the nation, you ring the bell on Constitution Day, September 17th.
Okay.
It's obviously a week. Congress enacted and created a week-long celebration. But at the beginning of it is tradition to ring the bell. So I call it like Hands Across America. You're ringing the bells. There are ladies and school children and different people ringing bells all across the nation at 4 o'clock
on September 17th.
Yes, on September 17th. So if you're at the John Stark House, you could come and ring a bell with the group.
Yeah.
Some will be ringing it at the State House. We meet with the governor earlier in the week. He signs a proclamation about the week.
I think it's so important. Having lived a lot in Europe, every town had a church with a steeple that had a clock tower or a bell tower, or maybe it wasn't even a church, but there was usually a clock tower or bell tower. So no matter where you were in the town, you could look up and tell what time it was, and it would also chime. So we do have, around here, we do have certain churches that still ring out the bells of time. I love it when I hear the bells chiming because it takes me back to my childhood and the years that I spent in Europe. So is that the kind of bell that's being rung? The church steeples? Bells?
It's all kinds of bells. We will be ringing individual bells. So if you think of the little school bells you might have seen on the Little House on the Prairie movies, those kind of bells that you ring.
Okay.
And for New Hampshireites, the Constitution, we were the 9th in ratifying states, so that one's very near and dear to our heart.
Okay, so tell me about that.
Well, the states had to ratify it after, and New Hampshire was the 9th one. So if you go to there's Constitution Rock. It is up in Concord. Okay. And so we celebrate that. That was in June, and we had a big celebration, and we popped some champagne to celebrate the anniversary.
This is the stuff
of it.
that I don't know this stuff. This is great that there, and that was what struck me being around. Oh my goodness, there were 140, 150 women, and let me tell you, they were all decked, and you had this gorgeous, sequin
well, this was
gown.
our big banquet ball.
Yeah, and handling the flag with gloves, and there was just so much respect and reverence, and it took.
Flag etiquette is a very important component for us. We try to teach it. We make sure we try to follow it as best we can. And
see, being raised as an Army brat, I say, on military bases, there was taps every night. And we would stop wherever we were, 5 o'clock, taps would play. And wherever we were, as children, we would stop and put our hands on our heart and wait as the flag was lowered. And there was just such a respect and reverence for our flag, for the people who are fighting, even recently. And then it goes back to the history of the people who have fought and died for our country.
Well, and most recently, if anyone was at the Sandwich Old Home Days up north,
Okay, yeah.
one of our chapters, the Pemigewasset Valley chapter, they had a wonderful booth on flag facts. So it was all decked out in red, white, and blue. And they had different, like the cornhole, you could throw the cornhole for different facts, and you give win prizes and things like
great.
that.
Yeah.
So our ladies are out in the community, just trying to get this kind of information out in a
Sure,
fun way. And
sure, teaching the
innovative
children
ways.
and some of us older children.
Yes, I mean, you're never too old to learn a different fact about the flag.
Absolutely, yeah.
So those are just the different kind of things that our ladies, they're out, as I said, they're out in the communities. They're educating on a variety of topics.
Right.
And not just educating, I guess they live. They live the flag etiquette.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just something that's a part of their
That's
fibers.
wonderful. I know, and I was sitting next to someone at the banquet who was saying that her chapter does a lot of work for the veterans and the veterans' families as well. So that's another, each different chapter has their own causes or their own, they should decide what they're wanting to do.
Right, there are so many different components to DAR. There's really everything from education to conservation, the Service to America component, veterans, support of our troops. On Friday, you'll notice that the ladies are always dressed in red, so we remember everyone deployed. We show our support for the troops. We also show support for the veterans. We welcome home, obviously, the Vietnam vets.
Yeah.
That's something we still, at every meeting, whenever we have a veteran going, you'll always hear us say, welcome home.
Yeah. And you talked about the honor flights. I had the
Yes.
privilege of just spontaneously being at an honor flight, and that was amazing. So can you tell us about the honor flights?
Well, the honor flights are incredible to go out and support. Usually at the Manchester airport is where most of we go. So as the guys come through, you're there with signs. It's very patriotic, very uplifting, and you're cheering for them.
This was Manchester Airport because I went to Pease Air Base.
Oh yeah, Pease has them that go through as well.
Okay, all right.
I just being the Manchester-based chapter, we tend to go out of the Manchester airport, but it's the same ceremony.
Sure.
At each place there, and it's great to be a part of the community effort because it isn't just DAR. Obviously, there are so many groups that are in support: Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts.
Yeah, and so these are the people who are coming home from being deployed.
Oh, that's over at Pease. That's different than the honor flight is for the veterans.
Okay,
that
okay,
have,
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yes, those are the ones that are going to D.C. and there
I
are
see.
specific flights in there. They're usually much older.
That's right. My father was involved in an honor flight because he retired from the military. So a couple years ago, he was privileged to go to be on an honor flight.
But you bring up a good point because we are sending the troops off here, obviously supporting them leaving and coming home.
Right.
Same thing with the honor flight. They leave very early in the morning and they come home very late at night from Washington, and there are people to welcome and cheer them on.
What is the one at Pease called?
Pease Greeters?
Yes.
Yes, they're their own independent group, but we do partner with them from time to time and certainly go out and support their efforts.
And that was very moving because that was the people who are the soldiers who are coming back after having been deployed. Their first place they touch down is Pease Air Base before they end up getting.
So you want to be the positive welcoming home force, and in some cases the flights are leaving. It depends on which one you're at.
Okay.
Sometimes we're sending troops off, and it's a big, want to encourage them as well.
Sure, to support them. Yeah. Wow. It's pretty fascinating. I'm excited to get involved more and be around other people who have that passion for patriotism and for standing up for helping each other. There was just a camaraderie that I felt among this incredible.
It is, like I said, it's a like-minded group, and that was something that drew me to it. Is that it was just this whole group of women that were from all walks of life, different backgrounds, different upbringings, different professions. But everyone had there was a common thread of patriotism through them.
Right.
And so we look forward to working on your membership journey.
Yeah.
And it is a journey when people join because, there's so much work that has to be done to get your application through.
Sure.
And sometimes you get lucky and you're a third or fourth generation. I was not. I was the first in my family to join. So.
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody else that has joined in my family.
Well, you're blazing a path.
It's not the first time. That's been kind of the story of my life in many ways. But it's just very interesting, especially now, to surround yourself with people who are making a difference, doing the right thing, doing good for our country. And, it was definitely, there was order in the whole Robert's Rules of Order. I've been involved in so many different business meetings before, but there was also a sense of independence. Each different table had their own flavor, and it was just a lovely group of.
That's what I said. Together, we're a wonderful quilt. Everybody, I guess the fabric weaves together nicely. Or someone, my state project rather is. We're a pollinator garden, so I've always joked and said we're all different flowers, but together we make a wonderful garden.
I love that. I'm going to use that.
You're more than welcome to.
That's wonderful. So how will people find you? How would people find you?
Well, they can go, they can find us on the website.
Okay.
We have a local website, nhssar.org.
NHS, New Hampshire State.
And New Hampshire State Organization, DAR.
Okay,
is one place.
Okay. NHS.
DAR.
Okay.
.org. There's
right.
also Facebook sites that we have. The New Hampshire Daughters, State Organization Daughters of the American Revolution.
Let's just send them to one place.
Yes, so you can find us in many places, but usually things that run in the newspaper, all the press releases.
Sure.
Have different.
And people can visit different of your chapter meetings and stuff too. Do they have to be a member to attend the different meetings?
Nope, they are more than welcome. Anybody is welcome to join us.
Nice.
And as I said, there's 21 chapters around the nation. They're around the state rather,
Yay.
and they all have a different flavor. And everybody, you'll be welcome at any of those.
Wonderful.
So every area around the state is represented.
Well, thank you so much for the work you're doing, and I know this is a lot of dedicated effort. Thank you for what you're doing, and thank you so much for being here and sharing with us today.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
So we have maybe a minute left. Is there any last thought that you'd like to share? If somebody's interested, what would you encourage them?
If someone's interested, seek us out. Come to a meeting. Come to an event.
Mm-hmm.
Come see what we're all about.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you come, as you mentioned, the excitement. There's always a lot of excitement. All of our chapters bring wonderful things to their communities, and I think if you come, you will see if that's something you're interested. If you're interested in community involvement, veterans, patriotism, education, there's something for everyone.
That's wonderful. I know you've invited me to speak at your local chapter in October, and we're gonna communicate with the spirit in the house.
We are looking forward to you coming. Yes, it's an old house.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you again, Trish, for being here, and thank you, listeners. And you can find us here every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. at WSMN.live, and you can find the replays at loisherman.com. Until next week. Look up, stay positive, and be the light in someone's day. God bless.
WSMN 1590, WSMN 95.3 FM Nashua. Listen, watch, and stream at WSMN.live.
USA Radio News.
I'm Brad Bernards. The president of one of Louisiana's